So when we started prepping for this summer get together fresh start, I was trying to think about topics that would be relevant for now, and there are so many things going on that it was like a laundry list of things to choose from. And so I was thinking, like, what are the universal things that are kind of showing up time and time again for the masses? Time management, work-life balance, communication, all of those things kept coming up, but I kept going back to how do we interact with each other? And how do our interactions impact the success of all of the work that we do every day? And so I borrowed for this session a little bit from two of our core values, and one service, the other integrity. Be empathetic to each other and be genuine in our interactions. So that's what this session today is going to be focused on. In your workbook, there is some kind of breakdown. It's kind of a summary cheat sheet, one-sheeter for a takeaway, and then there's questions on the next sheet that we'll get to a little bit into the session. So I'm going to start with the question, and I'm going to pose this to the group. What is culture? What does culture mean to you? How do you define culture? And the mic is right there with Caitlin. We can just do a roaming mic, I guess. How do you define culture?
For me, culture is the collective value set that we use to make all decisions, how we treat people, how we treat each other, how we do our work. And that's very important to me.
I love that. It's a great definition. Marty?
I look at it as like when someone asks me if I like where I work, what my answer is. I think my answer defines the culture that I'm working.
That's an awesome answer. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Kathy.
I'll put my mind in my cat. I think it's how you feel when you walk into the room. You walk into the room, you know the culture right away.
Yes, you can feel it in the air, right? It permeates the air we breathe. And that's how do I feel tonight? Go to work. And so really, when you look at culture, it's the sum of all the interactions between people. It's the sum of all the interactions between people. It's our interactions with one another. This morning, when you guys were competing against each other, that was hilarious. Like, oh my God, that will stay with me for a while. The faces, and I don't know, that just makes me happy, right? That was an interaction that I won't forget for a long time. And so that right there kind of dictates this culture of I really enjoy being right here, right now with you because of the interactions we're having. And then I want to talk a little bit about how compassion fits into the culture when we talk about interaction. Compassion isn't just tolerance. It's not just safety or caring or empathy or kindness. Compassion means truly embracing the belief that our fates are interdependent. We aren't just going through the same trials. We are truly in this together. It's almost like a summit. Together we make it. Weird, right? My actions impact you. Your actions impact me. My thoughts, feelings, beliefs have a very powerful impact on my environment, as do yours. And I think we forget that sometimes. I think we minimize the impact we have when we bring an attitude or a set of beliefs with us to any room. And although pleasant, being nice just doesn't cut it. That's part of it. But compassion without accountability doesn't address tough issues, nor does it acknowledge the inherent conflict when attempting to bring diverse viewpoints and skill sets together to solve big problems. Compassion without accountability. Similarly, accountability without compassion can result in a toxic culture where everybody is just challenged to get to the end and they dismiss the people who help them get there. So imagine for a moment a pendulum of compassion. A swing to the left represents more compassion. A swing to the right represents less compassion. We can apply this situation to any work culture or personal situation by asking ourselves, what would it look like to respond with more compassion? And what would it look like to respond with less compassion? So as we walk through these, I want you to think about and maybe even take notes if you want, if it helps you kind of process what you're thinking. On any given day here at work, where would you place us as a culture on this pendulum? Right? First one being the least compassionate on this pendulum. We often attack those who are different. They come with different viewpoints, different opinions, or they disagree with us outright. Judgment, prejudice, discrimination, and drama can all be a result of this kind of attitude. And it really comes from this fear of someone disagreeing with us, someone being different than us, and we see that as a threat. And so then we act or react with less compassion. It's kind of a win-lose competition all the time. And this is really where we get locked into a fixed mindset that we hear so much about. We don't grow here at all. Moving one notch over, it's a us versus them silo. So again, I'm wanting you guys to really think about at our workplace on a day-to-day basis, how do you feel? Where do you place our culture on any given day in this pendulum? So this is an us versus them silo thinking attitude. When teams are putting their own interests and goals above serving the company as a whole, they align around one common identity that is unique to them and maybe not others, and support each other to the detriment of the greater good. So maybe internally they're quite supportive, but they're not supporting the whole unit. With this mindset, you often see a hoarding of resources and controlling of information. When you move into the middle of the pendulum, you'll see kind of a you do you, I'll do me, we'll agree to disagree. It's a very lackluster place to be as a culture. You don't want to say there's less compassion. People may be nice to each other, but there's no real investment. There's no real empathy being shown. There's not a lot of enthusiasm and excitement when you're right there in the middle of the pendulum. As we swing more to the left, we start to begin to empathize with one another. And we start to recognize that everyone is experiencing some kind of struggle. Maybe very different. One person is maybe very different than others. But at some level, we are all struggling with something. Personal, professional, doesn't matter. And there's an odd comfort in knowing we're all struggling on some level, because at least we're not alone. And that's when we can really share our empathy with other people. That's not enough though. We have to take the next step to get alongside each other in the struggle and create something better together. After all, the real definition of compassion means to suffer with, and we'll get to that in a second. So now we swing over to the far left, and this is the beauty spot. This is where our successes become interdependent. In a truly compassionate work culture, we recognize that being in this together means we rely on each other. It is literally our core value of less me, more we. Similarly, when we were lost at sea yesterday, we had to help each other. We had to share resources. We had to talk through how are we going to get out of this alive. We need resources, inputs, and experience from other people. We need cooperation across departments and not be siloed in our thinking. To solve the biggest problems, we have to realize that the best idea doesn't care where it came from. It just doesn't. It doesn't matter as long as it's a great idea that we can share. Unless people feel safe, connected, and included, the best you can expect is compliance, not engagement. Now, I want to see, and I know there's a lot of you in here, who remembers 4 years ago when we did the Lego bridge building activity at Fresh Start? Okay, do you guys remember when we talked about building great teams and Google had done that Aristotle project research where they said, in order to have great teams, the #1 factor is what? In order to have a great team, what's the #1 factor you have to have? What's that?
Trust.
You're getting close.
Empathy.
You're getting close. It's 2 words.
Teamwork.
It all, the umbrella, everything you guys are saying is exactly right. Trust, respect, teamwork. You're so close. Psychological safety.
There you go.
Psychological safety, remember that? Psychological safety, that means up here, when I walk into a room, I feel safe. I feel protected, knowing I'm not gonna be judged if I mess up, if I make a mistake. Because I trust these people, they've got my back. We're in this together. And that's a powerful thing, when you feel, like when you walk into a room and you feel that, that's powerful. And you don't get that very often in life, so when you do, you need to embrace it. And that's what you get on the far left side of the pendulum. So here's the reality. Struggle is a part of life. Whenever we're dealing with differences and disagreements, we are invited into a struggle. The struggle could be with yourself, or it could be with others. Think about your current struggles that you have going on in your life right now. Just take a second. What struggles are you fighting? Whether it be with yourself or with others, okay? When you struggle against yourself, you might hear the narrative of like, I'll never figure this out. I should have never committed to this. I knew I couldn't handle this. I so wasn't set up for success on this one. I'm gonna fail. When you struggle against each other, you might hear things like, I can't believe she did that. Did you hear what he did? Oh yeah, of course he's late. He's always late. So typical. What does he even do? When we struggle against each other in that kind of an adversarial way though, with right and wrong, and winners and losers, struggle becomes extremely draining. Think about how you feel when you're around that kind of almost drama constantly, that negativity pulling your energy away. It can really impact a culture. And everything else is great, but that one component exists, it can really greatly impact a culture. So this is a question to your tables, and I want you to spend 3 or 4 minutes talking with each other about what is rooted in these struggles against ourselves and others. Why do we struggle and say those things to ourselves, that negative self-talk, or the negative talk about other people who aren't doing their jobs right? You just don't get it. What's rooted in that? Take a few minutes and then we'll go share it.
We said that, number one, when you're typically struggling within yourself or with someone else, that it can a lot of times come from an insecurity you have within yourself. And so that we talked about that. We also talked about how events like this are so important because when you do have to go and communicate with someone, it's really important to actually know them and know how they like to communicate, how they receive information, how they understand information. And when you have situations like this where you can sit and actually talk with people and learn who they are, it will help open up lines of communication and make things easier.
Yeah, thank you. You're amazing. Yeah, and the part that you nailed of a lot of times it comes from our own insecurities that we're projecting onto others. And that's hard for us to accept sometimes, but it is the reality of it. Next table.
We'll go.
Okay, Trisha.
I'm gonna steal the topic.
Rebecca very kindly mentioned that previous experiences that we've been involved in our lives can greatly impact how we, what we bring to the table. Not knowing that about other people could create triggers, and not knowing what these triggers are, you could go into something very innocent, you're not knowing that you are bringing a difficult situation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a great point.
This one kind of came to mind after we were talking about like values, not understanding people's values or where they're coming from can sometimes create conflict.
Absolutely can. And you know, since you bring that up, we've done this with a couple teams in the company, creating your own list of your own personal core values that then allows your own team to get to know you a little bit better and kind of what motivates you. If you're ever interested in doing something like that with your team, let us know. It's pretty cool. We did that. Lisa, like, I forgot, yeah, we did it with you guys. Yeah, it's really cool. And it actually really enlightens you enlighten yourself of like, these things are really important to me. That's crazy. They keep rising to the top. So let me know if you ever want to do that. Okay, well, thank you for that. So in a time when we're aspiring for greater connection, belonging, collaboration, and engagement, we really do need new perspectives and tools to understand how to transform how we engage with one another, how we interact with one another, so that it is purposeful and we understand with positive intent that people do have triggers that they bring with them from past experiences. Compassion is what makes us human. It's what brings us together and gets us back on track when we lose our way. So the word compassion itself comes from a Latin root meaning calm, with or together, and passion meaning struggle. Compassion is what it means is with struggle. We move forward. So compassion doesn't get rid of the struggle at all. Struggle is real, but it can turn our effort into something more productive, creative, more energizing. We can't change a lot of the things that happen around us, but we can change how we react to those things. And that's really what this is about. So what if we took on a new perspective, a growth mindset that we get from the left side of the pendulum? What if we were to say, the purpose of life isn't to get rid of the struggle, but instead, the purpose is to struggle together to find purpose? Just think about that for a second. Like, to just flip it on its head can be powerful in the way that you see your interactions. So then, in your packet, you've got 3 statements, or maybe not. I think I might just have them here. I don't know if everything's packet. But there's 3 statements. With your table, I want you to determine whether they're true or false. First one being, some people are just born with compassion. Next one, compassion is soft and is for sensitive people. And then the third one, compassion and accountability are kind of opposites. So take a few minutes to talk about those. The first statement, you guys think about, some people are just born with compassion. False. Okay, let's talk about that. Why is that false?
Because you're taught it growing up.
You're taught it growing up.
If you have nasty parents, you're more likely gonna be nasty to other kids at school, you know, kind of thing. Like, you learn by example.
Okay, you learn by example. It has a lot to do with the environment and people that you're in, Angela. There, I mean, I don't know that we'll ever know the answer, right? I think that, to your points, some people may be born with a little bit more, their DNA may just like move them over to the left side a little bit more, but you can be taught it, either side of the pendulum. And so it's all about, again, what you bring with you when you interact with people and how then that permeates the air around you. What about compassion is soft and for sensitive people? It's just a bunch of love. False. Stephen?
Yeah, I just think that.
Your table even. Wow. Someone's leaving on the job, you guys. It's okay. It's your own chance.
Yeah, I think we can be strong and still have passion. So everything false.
Absolutely. Yeah, I hate to think that we ever think compassion is only soft and for sensitive people. You can be really, really tough and still show compassion.
We talked about how compassion is like one of, sometimes depending on the situation, can be one of the hardest things to show. So that like automatically makes you not weak and soft. Because like, say for instance, has nothing to do with work, but like your kid draws on your walls. I just tell them, or do you tell them that they're an artist?
Yeah.
If you're an artist, that's not ever been like. Yeah. Compassion with accountability. Yes, there you go. Right. So then that leads into the third one. Compassion and accountability are opposites. False. Right? You can have both. And you very easily can have both, but it does take a trained mind to really think about how does that show up when I'm having a tough conversation? How can I be firm, clear with my communication, set boundaries, but still show compassion for the other person? Yeah, it's not easy. Because sometimes we're just so fed up. And we forget to just take a pause and say, wait a second, is this the best approach? So compassion is a mindset, and it starts with a decision to view ourselves and others as valuable, capable, and responsible. Thank you. Implementing a compassionate mindset means showing it in our day-to-day behavior. Real compassion can be turned on by flipping 3 switches. 3 switches. One, or each switch represents one aspect of how we treat ourselves and how we treat others. The first switch is value. Value means that you treat yourself and others as worthwhile and unconditionally valuable. That you see the world as a place where everyone has something to contribute. May not be the same thing that you have, and that's great. That's what makes us different, and it's beautiful. It should be the same. But there is value, inherent value in everyone. The second switch is capability. Capability means you treat yourself and others as capable to contributing to a solution. We are all in a room together. We can find a solution because we are capable. We have hired great people who do great work, and we can solve problems together. And this is a big one. The last one of responsibility. What this means for us is that regardless of what's happened before, we all share responsibility for moving forward. Even though we may fall into one dominant 16 personality category, like we did yesterday, even though we tend to default to certain behaviors, that is not an excuse for behavior. We all have a responsibility to flex, to learn, to challenge, to grow, and to stay as far on the left side of the pendulum as we can. So when we have the value switch turned on, we're going to see things like listening, no judgment, opening up, sharing ideas without fear. When that value switch is on, that's what you're going to get. When the value switch is turned off, you're going to get this feeling of my ideas are being dismissed. Feelings are actually viewed as like a liability or even a weapon. They'll be used against me. When it's off, people will avoid being vulnerable out of fear of what could happen. And these behaviors obviously will promote a very unsafe, toxic culture if continually overused. When the capability switch is on, you're going to see things like seeking to understand, assuming positive intent. Help me understand where you're coming from on that. I'm not going to assume. Help me understand. Believing that everyone has the capability to learn and grow in the right conditions. Inviting people to be a part of the solution, investing in our successes together, sharing ideas and resources, not hoarding and withholding information, and turning mistakes into learning opportunities. When the capability switch is off, we're going to see more things of thinking first, like I want to be understood. I'm not so concerned about what you think. You need to understand me. It's a very self-centered approach when the switch is off. See limitations instead of opportunities, scarcity instead of abundance. Avoid investing in people. Again, that's self-centered, me mentality. Withholding information, resources, and holding back or jumping to conclusions, making those assumptions that can then lead into that dramatic, negative, toxic environment. When you have that, when you have the capability switch turned off as well, this is just a really stagnant place for a culture to be because there's just no growth going on. And then lastly, the responsibility switch. Again, regardless of what has happened in the past is the past. You can't change it. It's done. We all have a responsibility to move forward together, period. So when this switch is on, we take ownership of our own feelings, thoughts, and behaviors, and we avoid taking ownership of others' thoughts and behaviors. We cannot control what other people think. We can only control ourselves. We ask directly and assertively for what we need and want. We enforce boundaries with compassion. I need this because. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad you understand. Let's talk through it. And we focus on what's best for the group, not what's best for me. So when you have this, you're going to see a lot more consistency in behavior, a lot more predictability, and a lot more safety. When this switch is off, we're going to avoid taking ownership. We're going to blame others for our failures. We're going to try to take over other people's behaviors and thoughts. We're going to attempt to isolate responsibility by attacking or blaming. We're going to turn conflict into a win-lose power struggle. I'm right, you're wrong. And we're going to focus on solely self-preservation. That does no one any good. So compassion without accountability gets you nowhere. Accountability without compassion will get you alienated. So think about how you see this playing out in your day-to-day lives, personal and professional. When the switches are on, we see connections, we see engagement, we see innovation, creativity. Ideas are flowing. People are having fun. They enjoy being together. There's ownership being taken, and there's loyalty to a process and a group of people. And when the switches are off, you're going to see disengagement, you're going to see division, you're going to see drain. People just feeling drained. And you know what that feels like, because we've all been there in different situations in our life. We know exactly what this feels like. So we all have a role in this. When someone decides to turn their switches off, it impacts the larger group. And I'm not saying that every day is going to be perfect and all switches are going to be on every day, because that's impossible. But what it does tell us is, man, we could really keep this front of mind. Are all three of my switches off today? Because that's pretty bad. And I'm going to guess people don't want to be around me today. So I might want to kind of like take a step back. And then think about, like, how can I get over this hurdle? One of my switches is off. Is that okay? Is it really going to impact the environment that I'm around? Does it matter? It may not. I may be okay with one switch off. But that self-awareness piece, mixed in with the 16 personalities of knowing what your default behaviors are, can really help you in your interactions with one another to build the right culture. So in your booklet, we're going to take a little bit longer to do these questions. We have 5 questions. Number 1, what gets in the way of keeping all the 3 switches on? And you talked a little bit about this one, so this shouldn't take too long. What do you do personally that gets in your own way? Everybody's a little bit different. What are some ways we can keep the switches on, even when others try and turn them off? What switch is hardest to keep on for you? And last but not least, this is going to be the big one of how can we do a better job at holding each other accountable to keep these switches on? We're all of us. Fair. It's true. Life literally gets in the way. And so we always just have to keep ourselves reminded of what's important. So what do you do? What do you do that gets in your own way? What are you guilty of?
Okay, so our table really talked about each one of these, and what we kept coming back to is it was the same things over and over in each box. And the 3 or 4 for our table was oftentimes we don't set expectations. We don't live by boundaries or respect others' boundaries. And then communication was a big one.
That's awesome. And that we don't set boundaries or we don't respect other people's boundaries. Sometimes we're so busy setting our own boundaries that we forget other people have too. So if you expect other people to respect your boundaries, you probably should do the same mutually. Yeah, Tara.
Each of you noted one of the things about having compassion is that a lot of times we automatically assume bad intent,
Yes.
right? If someone gives you something and it's at the last minute, it's like, why did I get this down? I could have got this a week ago and it would have helped me. But we all. Well, no, like, but we don't know, right?
Right.
A lot of times you don't know what is going on in someone else's workflow or what else they're working on, or what other priorities they're doing, right? So when you, part of having compassion is assuming positive intent. Don't assume that somebody gave you something in the last minute because they just slept on it. I mean, assume that there's a reason, and then we just need to be there.
Exactly. So be compassionate, assume the positive intent, but also understand that there's the accountability piece of, hey, can we talk about the timing on this? Right. What is it that prohibited you from getting this to me prior to this? Like, it really put me in a bind. Let's figure out how this can work out better so that it doesn't happen next time.
And is it a one-off scenario?
Right. Or is it a pattern of behavior?
Is it a pattern of
Right.
behavior? So I mean, I think that's the idea.
Absolutely.
You know, when you get this assuming positive intent, it's like, go, hey, is this a one-off or is this a pattern? To your point, it's a pattern, let's talk about how different. If it's a one-off, then maybe it's just a one-off and move on.
Assume positive intent, compassion, accountability all together. You can do them all at the same time in the same conversation. Laura.
So, one of the things I think is really important when we're talking about this is that you need to communicate. So the assumption should not be there. You should make sure that your team's aware. If there's going to be an issue, that's what your team's there to support you. And if you don't vocalize that, there could be resentment, there could be anger, there could be frustration in the team. So if you have a great manager, like I do, communicate.
I love that. And thanks for bringing that up because that even goes to, we talk about meetings etiquette that Nick brought up yesterday. And people who don't respond, who don't either decline or accept. And then you have the meeting and you're wondering where the heck is this? It's that compassion for others and the big group in totality that the least we can do is decline or accept an invite. Because if we hold true to better meeting etiquette, we need you there. We invited you because you are a valuable person to that conversation. So to accept and decline is actually really easy and it would really help in that communication piece. If we're just talking about meetings, that's a place to start. Right.
And then the follow-up with the same positive intent is if you need the person there and they haven't responded, maybe just message them because I just have an inbox full of misfits, right? If you totally not intentional.
Absolutely. Yep, and it doesn't take long to reach out to someone, but instead sometimes we just like, oh, where are they? They've been intentionally doing this. Yeah, they're plugging them off. What are some ways we can keep the switches on when life gets in the way? When life gets messy, Renee.
Patience, take time.
Patience is, yeah, it's a virtue for sure, and it's easier said than done sometimes, I get it. But take some deep breaths. And have some patience, Jake.
Make sure I eat like every 2 hours.
That's a real thing. That angry Jake is not good. When you brought up psychological safety, it made me think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yes.
You gotta eat, you gotta eat. I gotta make sure you're right. You gotta eat your basic needs. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
So in the field, we all have owners who try to turn our switches off at some point or another. And for me, it has to be a level set. And the best way for me to level set is to get outside, go for a fast walk.
That's a great
Change your environment.
Yes.
Get out of that, wherever you're at, and then level set.
That's great. Activity, moving your body helps a lot. Yes, right?
I really like to have set expectations because we get a lot of communication back and forth. And a lot of it's really good information, but I know I always appreciate it when someone's like, oh, by the way, and Marty, please submit this by the end of the day or whatever. So just setting those our expectations is important.
Yeah, and that goes with Laura's communication. Let's really think about how we communicate with each other, because that's in essence interacting. And this is all about interactions, and how we interact with each other builds either a toxic culture or a really positive culture. How do we keep each other? Oh, we have one more, Jill.
Oh, yeah. So you're just gonna call this name. I like to, I get in my head a lot and I go to someone I can trust and I have to get it out. And I'll be like, what? You know, I have to get
It's a little
out,
bit crazy.
I have to get out the stuff and not worry about it anymore. And then that would like drive me down, so I can get it out of my brain and out of just out.
And you know,
But I'm so much better. Thank you, Kelly Mary.
we're all. Thank you, very, very much. It's like, and we all have a little crazy, and that's good. A little crazy is good. But Carrie was saying too, like, people get in your own heads a lot, and it can spiral downhill fast if you let it. If you don't let that out and purge that, oof, right? But you gotta have that safe space where you feel like, okay, I can tell this person it's not gonna leave this area. And then it doesn't permeate the air that other people are breathing. That's the key. That's the key, because that is a cancer. Yeah. Did we have something back there?
I was gonna say, to tag on to Jill, as leaders, it's also our job to read the room and read the team. And when somebody's not talking and they're normally talking, is to take the time and give them that safe space and figure out what's going on.
That's so great. Yes.
That kind of goes off with Kelly's, where if you don't feel validated in what you're doing, then it's gonna be really hard for you to keep, accountable with the team, essentially making sure that that communication is always flowing so that you can reach the same end goal that you started with.
And that's that value switch. That value switch has to be on for that. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, keep an open mind.
Keep an open mind.
Yeah, but having an open mind, yeah, when you're talking to somebody, because if you're closed off, then there's communication
Absolutely.
at that point. Yeah.
It's that. There's no growth, there's no communication when you close your mind. So. We are right at time. This is amazing. How did this? Our challenge, and we choose to accept it, which I know each one of you
It's not
does.
gonna slow down.
Treat yourself and others as worthwhile and unconditionally valuable. Turn that switch on. Treat yourself and others as capable of contributing to a solution. Turn that switch on. And lastly, regardless of what's happened before, we are all responsible for how we move forward. Turn that switch on.